My dad raised his glass at my engagement party, smiled at the crowd, and tried to turn me into a punchline. I did not cry. I did not storm out. I opened my laptop, and I let the truth do the talking. My name is Avery Sinclair. I am 29 years old, and I work as a forensic accountant. The night this happened, there were about 60 guests in the room, friends, co-workers, and relatives who believed our family was polished and respectable. The room was warm with candles and soft music, and my fiancé, Connor Reed, kept squeezing my hand like he could sense something coming. My father, Gordon Sinclair, looked proud from a distance. Up close, I could see the familiar edge in his smile, the one that always showed up when he wanted control. Gordon has always loved an audience. He loved speeches at holidays, jokes at funerals, and stories that made him look sharp while making someone else look small. He picked me as the easiest target, because I was the daughter who kept the peace. My mother, Elaine Sinclair, hovered near the dessert table, watching faces, not fixing anything. My best friend, Harper Lane, was across the room with her phone in her purse, trying to be present, trying not to be tense. Everything looked perfect, until Gordon tapped his glass and asked for attention. He said he was grateful Connor was willing to take on the challenge of loving me. He said, with a laugh, that his daughter finally found a man desperate enough to say yes. The laughter did not rise the way he expected. It came out scattered, nervous, and thin, because people could feel it was cruel. Connor stiffened beside me, jaw tight. I felt the old pressure to smile, to smooth it over, to save my father from consequences. Instead, I looked at Gordon, then at the crowd, and I made a choice I had been preparing for 3 months. I stood, walked to the small table near the stage, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the dim room, and I connected it to the venue display. Gordon frowned, still smiling, still expecting me to play along. He had no idea that the reason I stayed calm was not strength. It was evidence. 3 months earlier, I found a set of transfers that led straight back to Sinclair Price Capital, and I named the file project Lantern. 3 months earlier, I was finishing a routine review at my firm, and one line item kept bothering me. The payment description looked normal, but the routing did not. The money moved through a vendor name I had never seen. Then it split. Then it disappeared into small transfers. I followed it the way I always do. Slow, quiet, and stubborn. I pulled invoices. I pulled deposit logs. I compared dates, and I compared signatures. The deeper I went, the more the pattern repeated. It was the same kind of transaction chain, dressed up in different outfits. Each chain ended near the same place, Sinclair Price Capital. That name hit like cold water, because it was my father company. Gordon Sinclair and his partner, Malcolm Price, built it together. It was the business my family bragged about at holidays and used as proof of status. I told myself it might be a coincidence, because I wanted it to be. Then I found a vendor registration file, and the mailing address matched a property my father once managed. I opened a private folder on my encrypted drive, and I labeled it Project Lantern. I did not want drama. I wanted clarity. I started building a clean trail: bank references, invoice numbers, approval emails, and timing. I pulled public records, and I pulled corporate filings, because paperwork tells the truth when people do not. Every time I thought I had reached the end, the trail looped back to the same accounts. I kept my voice calm at home, but my body felt tense. Connor Reed noticed, because he always notices. I told him I found something connected to my father business, and it looked wrong. Connor asked if I was safe, and I said yes, because I was not confronting anyone yet. Harper Lane was the only friend I told, and only in broad strokes. She said my father has always needed power, and power does not share well. I planned to handle it privately. My idea was simple: finish the forensic packet, then hand it to Malcolm Price after the engagement party, in a quiet room. I thought Malcolm would take it seriously and protect the company before it became public. I thought my father would never be foolish enough to light a match in a crowded room. Then Gordon raised his glass and chose humiliation as entertainment. not knowing I had already built the lantern. When the display connected, the room went still in a way I could hear. The first slide was plain, just a timeline and account references. No insults, no sarcasm, only dates and transaction paths. I faced the guests and said I did not plan to speak tonight. I said I came to celebrate my engagement and to thank the people who showed up with love. Then I said one more thing. I will not be used as a joke in public. Gordon Sinclair laughed, trying to recover, and told everyone I am being dramatic. The laugh sounded thin because the screen behind me did not laugh. The next slide showed a flow of payments, vendor to intermediary to final account. I did not name anyone as a criminal. I described the pattern as irregular, repeated, and unexplained. I said I built Project Lantern to protect the truth, not to start a war. Malcolm Price stepped forward from the left side of the room, and his face changed as he read. His hand lifted, like he wanted to stop time. Gordon took one step toward the table, eyes sharp, and he reached for the cable. Sloane Mercer, the event manager, blocked him without touching him, and she asked him to step back. Connor Reed moved closer to me, shoulder to shoulder, not speaking, but present. I advanced the slide again, and the total figure appeared in words, $837,000 across 10 years, based on the records I verified. A glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered softly near the bar. Gordon froze, then snapped that I am lying and that I am trying to ruin him. I looked at him and said the records do not have feelings. They have numbers. Elaine Sinclair whispered my name from the dessert table, and her eyes looked frightened, not surprised. I told Malcolm that an independent audit should be triggered immediately, and I told the room I would share the full packet with counsel and auditors, not with gossip. Gordon opened his mouth for another joke, and nothing came out. The performance was over, because the evidence was louder than his voice. Malcolm Price did not argue. He acted. He asked me for a copy of the packet, and I handed him a drive prepared in advance. He told the guests the party would pause, and he asked key staff to stay. He stepped into a side room, phone already in hand, and called for independent auditors before the music resumed. Gordon Sinclair tried to follow him, but Malcolm told him to stop, and his tone carried authority Gordon was not used to hearing. Elaine Sinclair approached me, face pale, and asked why I did this tonight. I told her I did not choose tonight. Gordon chose tonight, when he toasted cruelty. Connor Reed wrapped an arm around my back and guided me toward the hallway, because he knew I needed air. Harper Lane met us near the door, eyes wide, and she said she is proud of me for not shrinking. Outside, the night felt colder and cleaner. Gordon came out a few minutes later, and his anger finally spilled. He said I betrayed him, and he said I will regret it. I told him he already made choices that caused regret, and now the bill arrived. We left, because the rest belonged to auditors and attorneys, not to shouting. The next morning, Malcolm Price emailed me a formal request for the full Project Lantern file, for his legal team and the independent firm. Alyssa from my own firm counsel team advised me on chain of custody, and I followed every instruction. Gordon sent messages that swung between rage and pleading, and I did not answer. Elaine sent one short message asking to talk, and I told her to do it with a third party present. By the end of that week, the company accounts were under review, and access was restricted. Friends texted me asking what happened, and I said only this: I chose truth over performance. Connor told me we could still have a wedding, and it could be small, safe, and ours. I believed him, because for the first time, I was not building a life around my father's approval. I was building it around my own standards. The independent audit began the next morning, and it moved fast on purpose. Malcolm Price sent a company-wide notice, saying access to certain accounts was restricted, and no records were to be altered. He brought in Dr. Renee Walsh, an outside auditor with a reputation for quiet precision. Renee did not arrive with drama. She arrived with a checklist and a team that asked for everything: bank statements, vendor contracts, approval logs, email archives, and the server backups that people forget exist. Gordon Sinclair tried to play offended, then tried to play innocent, then tried to play victim. Malcolm did not argue. He suspended Gordon from financial control during the review, and he said the words interim safeguard like a door closing. Elaine Sinclair called me that night, voice thin, asking if I could undo it. I told her I did not create the pattern. I only illuminated it. Connor Reed sat beside me on the couch, and he asked if I was afraid. I told him I was tired, and I was done being used as a shield. Harper Lane came over with takeout, and she said the room probably felt different without my father's script. She was right. My phone kept buzzing with relatives who never asked about my life, but suddenly had opinions about my choices. I did not respond, because I had learned that noise is not evidence. 2 days into the audit, Renee requested a formal interview with me. She asked how I built Project Lantern, and I walked her through my process, sources, verification, and chain of custody. Renee nodded and said my documentation was clean. She also said the audit was finding the same pathways, repeating like a fingerprint. That night, Malcolm emailed me one line: "Do not engage with Gordon, and do not attend any meetings without counsel." Gordon sent a message anyway, saying he was my father, and I was supposed to protect him. I stared at it for a long time, then I saved it and closed the app. The next week would decide whether my father's toast was just cruelty or a mistake that finally opened the door to consequences. When Dr. Renee Walsh delivered her preliminary findings, Malcolm Price looked like someone absorbing a collapse. The report confirmed the same total Project Lantern showed: $837,000, routed through layered vendors over 10 years. The vendor names changed, but the approval pattern did not. One signature, one set of internal authorizations, and timing that matched cash flow needs, not business purpose. Malcolm called an emergency board meeting, and Gordon Sinclair was asked to attend with counsel. Gordon arrived angry, then arrived pleading, then arrived quiet when he realized the room was not his audience. Malcolm stated that the company would pursue civil recovery and that a criminal referral would be considered based on counsel advice. Gordon tried to speak over him, and Malcolm told him to stop. Elaine Sinclair sat in the back row, hands clasped tight, watching the ground, not the people. After the meeting, Elaine asked to see me privately, and I refused. I offered a therapist office or a mediator because I was not walking into another trap. Elaine finally said the words I never heard from her as a child: "I should have stopped him." She did not say it loudly, but she said it. She also admitted she knew there were money problems, and she chose not to ask questions because questions upset Gordon. I told her silence is a choice, and it always charges interest. Malcolm asked me to provide sworn statements for the legal file, and I agreed, because truth needs structure. Connor Reed told me he was proud of me, and I believed him. Harper Lane told me people will blame the person who turns on the light, because darkness benefits them. Within days, Gordon was removed from day-to-day operations, and his access was cut. The community gossip started, but this time it did not feel like power. It felt like fallout. The months after the engagement party were not cinematic. They were procedural. Attorneys wrote letters. Auditors wrote summaries. Bank records arrived in neat batches, and each batch narrowed the space for denial. Gordon Sinclair tried to regain control through public charm, then through private pressure, and both failed. He lost allies, because spreadsheets are harder to argue with than feelings. Elaine Sinclair started therapy, and she sent me a message that did not ask for forgiveness. It only acknowledged harm. I did not reply right away, because trust does not rebuild on schedule. Malcolm Price continued running Sinclair Price Capital without Gordon, and he pushed transparency measures into policy, dual approvals, external reviews, and vendor verification that could not be overridden by ego. Connor Reed and I made a decision that surprised everyone who expected us to pause our lives for scandal. We held a small ceremony, with a short guest list, and no speeches from people who love the sound of their own power. Harper Lane stood beside me, and she cried when I walked in, because she knew what it cost to get here. We did not invite Gordon. We did not debate it. We chose peace, because peace is a choice, not a gift. After the ceremony, Connor and I ate dinner with our closest friends, and I felt something simple return: the ability to breathe without bracing. Later that night, I opened my laptop and closed Project Lantern, not because the case was done, but because I no longer needed the folder to remind me who I am. I am not the daughter who absorbs humiliation to keep a room comfortable. I am the woman who brought receipts, protected the truth, and built a life that does not depend on a father's approval. A week after our small ceremony, Gordon Sinclair tried to claw back the only thing he still thought he owned: the story. He sent a long email to my extended family, framed like a heartfelt confession, and it was mostly blame. He said I misunderstood accounting. He said Malcolm Price was jealous. He said Dr. Renee Walsh was biased because she was hired by the company. He even said Connor Reed put ideas in my head, like love turns a grown woman into a puppet. The email ended with a request for prayer and a warning that I was tearing the family apart. Harper Lane forwarded it to me with one line: "Do not respond." Malcolm forwarded it to company counsel with one line: "Preserve everything." My attorney advised me to stay silent publicly, because public arguments feed the person who lives for an audience. Gordon tried a private angle next. He showed up outside my office building, waiting near the curb like he had every right. He asked for 5 minutes, and his voice sounded softer than I remembered, but his eyes stayed sharp. He said he could make this easier if I stopped cooperating. He said I could save Elaine Sinclair humiliation, and I could save the company reputation if I recanted. I told him I did not accuse. I documented. I told him the audit confirmed the numbers. Gordon's smile tightened, and he asked if I wanted him to be ruined. I told him he ruined himself the moment he chose fraud, and the moment he chose to toast his daughter as entertainment. When he stepped closer, my attorney stepped out of the lobby and told him to leave, because all contact must go through counsel now. Gordon backed up just enough to look reasonable. Then he said something quiet and ugly: "That I will learn what it means to lose." My attorney filed for a no-contact directive that afternoon. Not dramatic, just precise. Meanwhile, Malcolm pushed the legal work forward. Civil recovery filings went out, and preservation notices went to banks and vendors tied to the audit trail. Renee continued tracing approvals, and she found additional internal emails that matched Gordon authorization cadence. The company board voted to formally remove Gordon from any role, including advisory access. When that notice became official, Gordon stopped pretending it was a misunderstanding. He started calling it a betrayal, and for the first time, people stopped nodding along. Because betrayal is not what you call evidence. Betrayal is what you call consequences, when you finally have to pay for what you did. The deposition was scheduled for early morning, in a conference room that smelled like toner and coffee. Malcolm Price arrived with counsel, calm and hard to read. Dr. Renee Walsh arrived with a binder, thick enough to bend. Gordon Sinclair arrived with his attorney and his familiar posture, shoulders back, chin high, like arrogance could still protect him. Elaine Sinclair came too, sitting quietly near the wall, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the carpet. I did not speak to Gordon. I did not speak to Elaine either. My attorney said we keep everything clean. The questions started simple: role, responsibilities, approval authority, vendor selection, and internal controls. Gordon answered with confidence at first, denying intent, denying knowledge, denying patterns that were printed in front of him. Then Renee placed a timeline on the table: payment chains, approval timestamps, and emails that matched Gordon login credentials. The room changed. Gordon started saying he does not recall. Then he started saying assistants handled it. Then he started saying Malcolm knew. Malcolm did not react. He only slid forward board, minutes, and segregation of duty documents. Gordon's voice tightened. The attorney asked about vendor ownership, and Renee presented registration records tied to an address Gordon used for personal property tax filings. Gordon's face drained, because paper does not care how powerful you feel. When the questioning reached personal benefit, the tone turned colder. Credit card payments, travel labeled as client development, and reimbursements that never matched any legitimate contract. Gordon tried to laugh, once, and no one laughed with him. Elaine made a small sound, like a breath caught in her throat. After a break, Elaine asked to speak to me in the hallway. She did not ask for comfort. She asked for clarity. She said she suspected money problems for years, and she chose silence because confronting Gordon meant conflict. I told her silence is still participation, even when it feels passive. Elaine nodded slowly, and she said she is in therapy now, because she finally understands her own fear does not excuse my harm. Back in the room, Gordon ended the session looking smaller, not because anyone yelled, but because the truth had shape. When it was over, Malcolm told counsel to proceed, and Renee told me quietly that Project Lantern saved them months. I walked out into daylight, feeling tired, but clear. My father used to treat me like a prop. In that room, he was finally treated like what he was, a person accountable to facts. By late spring, the case had a direction, and the outcome stopped feeling abstract. Sinclair Price Capital filed for civil recovery, and the bank cooperation accelerated once subpoenas landed. Malcolm Price offered a settlement path that protected employees and clients, but did not protect lies. Gordon Sinclair rejected it at first. Then his attorney started asking different questions because the evidence kept stacking. Dr. Renee Walsh produced a final report, tightened totals, mapped pathways, and documented controls Gordon bypassed. Company counsel prepared a referral packet, and Malcolm said publicly, with calm authority, that transparency is how they rebuild. The community reaction was predictable. Some people acted shocked, some acted smug, and some pretended they never liked Gordon anyway. The difference was that nobody could pretend it was only a family argument. It was business misconduct, confirmed by independent work. Elaine Sinclair continued therapy, and she sent me a message that did not ask to be forgiven. She wrote that she is sorry, and she is learning how she enabled harm. She wrote that she understands why I needed boundaries. I did not respond immediately, but I saved it, because it was the first time her words did not carry a hook. Connor Reed and I focused on ordinary things, work, dinners, weekends that did not revolve around crisis. Harper Lane reminded me that normal life is not boring. It is victory. Malcolm asked me once, privately, if I regretted showing the report at the engagement party. I told him I regret only one thing, that I waited so long to stop shrinking. Gordon tried one final push, asking to meet, asking for family unity, asking for mercy. My attorney said no, and I agreed. Mercy is not access. Mercy is not silence. Mercy is letting the process be fair, and letting outcomes follow evidence. When I look back, the most important moment was not the toast, or the screen, or the gasp in the room. The most important moment was my decision to stand there without trembling, and let truth speak in a language my father could not bully. I did not lose my family that night. I lost the illusion that cruelty deserves protection, and in exchange, I gained something cleaner, a life built on reality, and a future that does not depend on anyone else's approval. By early summer, Gordon Sinclair stopped calling it a misunderstanding and started calling it persecution, because the facts would not move. Malcolm Price offered one final settlement window, not to protect Gordon, but to protect the company from months of collapse. The terms were direct. Gordon would repay what could be recovered, surrender his equity interest, resign permanently, and accept that the legal record would stand. Gordon refused, because refusal was the last place he still felt powerful. So the next step arrived, the one he thought would never touch him. Company counsel sent the referral packet forward, and the bank cooperation accelerated immediately. Renee Walsh confirmed chain of custody, confirmed the approval pattern, and confirmed that the controls were bypassed intentionally. When the news reached our community, the reaction was split the way small towns always split. Some people tried to say it is family business, and some people whispered that Avery Sinclair must have been harsh. Then the filing became public, and the whispers changed shape. It is hard to defend a pattern, when the pattern is written in dates and amounts. Elaine Sinclair called me one night, voice small, asking what would happen next. I told her I did not know the exact next step, but I knew one truth. You cannot toast cruelty in public and hide fraud in private forever. Elaine started crying, and she said she feels like she lost everything. I told her she lost an illusion, and I lost years of peace. The difference is, I am not asking for sympathy. Malcolm sent me a short update a week later. Gordon access to company accounts was fully terminated. His office was cleared, and staff were instructed not to engage with him directly. Gordon tried to show up anyway, acting offended, demanding entry, and security walked him out. That detail did not make me happy. It made me quiet, because I remembered every time Gordon walked into a room and expected people to shift for him. Now, the room did not shift. Connor Reed asked if I wanted to celebrate. I told him no. I wanted to breathe. We went for a long walk instead, and the silence felt clean. Consequence was not a dramatic explosion. It was a slow removal of access, piece by piece, until Gordon had to face the one thing he never respected: a world that runs on proof, not performance. The first real apology did not come from Gordon Sinclair. It came from Elaine Sinclair on a Tuesday afternoon in a therapist's office, with a box of tissues between us and a neutral third party in the room. Elaine did not ask me to forgive Gordon. She asked me to believe her when she said she finally sees what she did. She said she hid behind politeness, because politeness kept the house calm. She said she trained herself to laugh at Gordon jokes, because laughter prevented anger. She said she watched him sharpen his words on me, and she told herself it was normal, because admitting it was abuse would mean she failed as a mother. Hearing her say the word abuse out loud made my stomach twist, because it named the thing we always called personality. I told Elaine I'm glad she is getting help, but help does not erase history. Elaine nodded, and she said she understands that access is not automatic anymore. She also admitted she knew Gordon had money issues for years, and she chose not to look too closely, because looking too closely would have forced her to act. I told her silence is still a form of action, even when you call it survival. Elaine agreed, and she did not argue. That was new. After that session, I did not feel healed. I felt clear. Harper Lane asked me later if I felt guilty. I told her guilt is what I used to feel when I set boundaries, and I'm not doing that anymore. Connor Reed and I kept our life small on purpose. Dinners at home, weekends with people who do not perform, mornings that do not start with dread. Gordon attempted contact through a cousin, then through a family friend, and each time my attorney replied the same way: no contact. And all matters through counsel. Gordon sent one letter that tried to sound fatherly, telling me I will regret this when he is gone. I read it once, then filed it, because regret is not a weapon that works on someone who chose truth. The strange part was the quiet. Without Gordon, the family noise dropped, and what remained was the simple reality I had avoided for years. My peace was never fragile. It was just crowded out. A full year after the engagement party, I walked into a conference room at work and realized my hands were not shaking. I was presenting a report, not about Gordon Sinclair, not about Sinclair Price Capital, just my actual job: clean numbers, clean language, and a team that trusted me. After the meeting, Connor Reed texted me a photo of our dinner plan, and Harper Lane texted a joke, and the ordinary felt like a gift. Malcolm Price sent a final update that month. Civil recovery was proceeding, the company had stabilized, and new controls were now policy, not reaction. He thanked me again for Project Lantern, and I told him the truth. I built it because I could not unsee what I saw. Elaine Sinclair kept attending therapy, and she sent occasional messages that did not demand closeness, only accountability. I answered some, and I ignored others, because I was learning that response is a choice, not an obligation. Gordon Sinclair faded from our social circles in a way he never imagined. People stopped inviting him, stopped calling him for advice, stopped treating his opinions like law. That consequence was not my revenge. It was the natural outcome of losing trust. One evening, Connor and I hosted a small dinner for friends. No speeches, no toasts that cut, no performances that required me to smile through pain. Harper raised her glass and said she is proud of the woman I became. I laughed and told her I did not become someone new. I became someone who stopped shrinking. Later that night, I opened my laptop and looked at the Project Lantern folder one last time. I did not feel triumph. I felt closure. I renamed the folder Archive, and I locked it away, because my life is not a case file anymore. If someone listening to this is still swallowing cruelty to keep the room comfortable, I want you to hear one thing clearly. Protecting a liar is not loyalty. It is surrender. And when you stop surrendering, the world does not end. Sometimes, it finally begins. In the months after the engagement party, the hardest part was not the legal process, it was the way Gordon Sinclair tried to rewrite the emotional story. He could not change bank statements, so he tried to change what people believed about me. He told anyone who would listen that I was cold, ambitious, and ungrateful. He said a real daughter would have handled it privately, and he said I humiliated him for attention. Harper Lane told me to stop reading the rumors, because rumors are a job with no paycheck. Connor Reed told me the same thing. We do not build our life around a man who turns love into leverage. Elaine Sinclair reached out again, but this time she did it the only way that mattered, with limits and accountability. She asked if I would meet her in a therapist office for 1 hour with a clear end time. I agreed, because a controlled room is safer than a family kitchen. Elaine did not beg. She did not demand. She said she spent years trying to survive Gordon moods, and she called that survival. Then she said she finally understands that her survival cost me my dignity. Hearing her say dignity made my throat tighten, because it was the exact thing Gordon tried to steal with a toast. Elaine told me she is not asking for forgiveness. She is asking for a chance to stop harming me, even if we never become close. I told her that is a start, but it is not a reset. I told her my boundary is simple: no messages from Gordon, no requests to soften outcomes, and no pretending the past was a misunderstanding. Elaine nodded, and she did not argue. That was new. When I left the session, I did not feel warm. I felt steady. Later that week, Gordon tried another move. He sent a letter to Connor, asking to speak man to man. Connor handed it to me without opening it. We forwarded it to counsel, documented it, and did not respond. Gordon always believed he could find a side door. He did not understand that I finally stopped leaving doors unlocked. The legal consequences kept moving, because paperwork does not get tired. Malcolm Price and company counsel pushed civil recovery forward, and the bank records made the path cleaner with every week. Dr. Renee Walsh delivered a final audit update that tightened the story. The same vendor chains, the same approvals, the same timing, and the same benefit. Gordon Sinclair, lawyer, asked again for a settlement that would keep it quiet. Malcolm said, "Quiet is not a solution, it is how it lasted." A formal hearing was scheduled, and I prepared a statement with my attorney, focused on facts, not emotion. That was harder than it sounds, because humiliation leaves a taste, and rage wants to speak louder than numbers. In the hearing room, Gordon sat stiff, face set, still trying to look like authority. When the questions turned to approvals, he claimed he was not involved. When the emails appeared, he claimed assistants used his credentials. When the vendor ownership records appeared, he stopped claiming and started saying he did not recall. Malcolm did not react. He only asked for the record to reflect each contradiction. Elaine Sinclair sat behind him, and for the first time, she did not reach for his hand. Afterward, Gordon tried to approach me in the hallway, voice low, asking if we could end this. My attorney stepped between us and reminded him of the no-contact directive. Gordon looked at me and said, "I will regret it." I told him I already regretted years of silence, and I will not add one more. Connor waited outside, and when I walked out, he did not ask me to be strong. He just handed me a bottle of water and said, "We are going home." That sentence mattered. It meant my life had a center that Gordon could not touch, no matter how loud he tried to be. After the hearings, I expected relief to arrive all at once, but it arrived in pieces. Some mornings I woke up calm, and some mornings I woke up angry, because my body still remembered being trained to smile through cruelty. Harper Lane reminded me that recovery is not a straight line, it is a practice. Connor Reed, helped by keeping our life ordinary on purpose, grocery lists, weekend walks, and dinners with people who do not need an audience. Malcolm Price asked if I would consult on strengthening company controls, because he wanted the culture to change, not just the paperwork. I agreed, because I did not want another daughter at another table, watching her pain become a joke. Elaine Sinclair kept her distance, but she also kept her promise. She did not pressure me, and she did not smuggle Gordon messages. She sent one short note once a month, saying she is in therapy, and she is learning, and she understands why I chose boundaries. I answered one of those notes with one sentence: keep doing the work. That was all I could give, and it was enough. One evening, Connor and I hosted a small dinner, just friends, no speeches, no forced gratitude. Harper raised her glass and said to peace, "That is earned." I laughed, because it sounded simple, but it was true. Later that night, I opened my laptop and scrolled past the Project Lantern archive without clicking it. That was a quiet milestone. I did not need to look at the file to remember my power. I had already proven it, not by winning an argument, but by refusing to shrink. By late fall, the social consequences had settled into something colder than gossip: absence. Gordon Sinclair stopped being invited to charity dinners, stopped being asked to speak at panels, and stopped being treated like a local authority. People who once laughed at his jokes now avoided him, because they did not want proximity to scandal. Gordon called it betrayal, but it was actually accountability doing its quiet work. Malcolm Price focused on keeping Sinclair Price Capital stable, and he kept communication with staff direct and calm. Dr. Renee Walsh work became the backbone of new controls, dual approvals, vendor verification, and independent reviews that could not be overridden by ego. Connor Reed and I learned how to live without bracing for the next message. Harper Lane kept reminding me that peace is not fragile, it is protected. Elaine Sinclair attended therapy regularly, and she stopped performing loyalty for Gordon in public. That alone shifted the family dynamic more than any argument ever did. One day, Elaine asked if she could come to my office for coffee, just her and me, no discussion of Gordon. I agreed, and it felt strange, like meeting a version of my mother I never had. Elaine told me she used to believe love meant endurance, and now she believes love means responsibility. She said she is learning how to tolerate discomfort without demanding other people carry it for her. I did not hug her. I did not soften the past. I told her I see the effort, and effort matters, but the timeline does not rewind. Elaine nodded, and she accepted that. When she left, I felt something small unclench. It did not mean we were healed. It meant I was no longer alone in naming reality. The final settlement conference took place on a gray Tuesday, in a law office with heavy doors. Gordon Sinclair arrived with his attorney, and the arrogance looked worn, like a suit that no longer fit. Malcolm Price arrived with counsel and a clean posture. I was not there to perform. I was there because my documentation began the chain, and I wanted the ending to be real. The terms were laid out again: repayment, surrender of equity, resignation, and a formal statement acknowledging wrongdoing. Gordon resisted the statement at first, because public image was always his oxygen. Malcolm told him quietly that there is no deal without truth on paper. Dr. Renee Walsh had prepared summaries that made denial feel childish. Gordon's attorney pulled him aside, and after a long whisper, Gordon returned and signed. His hand shook slightly, and his jaw clenched like he was swallowing glass. I did not gloat. I watched. Gordon looked at me once, as if searching for mercy. I did not offer anger, and I did not offer comfort. I offered silence, because silence was finally mine, not forced. Elaine Sinclair was not in the room, by choice, by boundary, by the new reality. When it ended, Malcolm thanked me for my work, and he said the company would rebuild on transparency. Connor Reed met me outside and held my hand while we walked to the car. He asked if I felt closure. I told him I felt an ending. Closure, I learned, is something you build after the ending, with days that are ordinary and safe. After the settlement, my world got quieter, and quieter felt unfamiliar at first. I kept expecting the next shoe to drop, because Gordon Sinclair always found a way to make himself the center. But the legal terms included strict boundaries, and the company enforcement was real. Gordon stopped contacting me through relatives, because the consequences were written and monitored. Elaine Sinclair continued therapy, and she sent a short note saying she signed her own separation of finances from Gordon, and she said she feels terrified and relieved. I understood that feeling, because choosing yourself after decades of training is terrifying. Harper Lane took me out for dinner to celebrate, and she did not call it a victory over Gordon. She called it a victory for Avery Sinclair. Connor Reed and I took a weekend trip, small, quiet, and ours, because we wanted memories that had nothing to do with courtrooms. When we came back, I found myself laughing more easily, because my nervous system started believing what my mind already knew. The worst part is over. One afternoon, I received a message from a young woman in my industry, saying she watched how I handled public humiliation with proof, and it gave her courage to report her own workplace fraud. I sat with that message for a long time, because it reminded me why Project Lantern mattered. It was never just about my father. It was about refusing to protect harm, and refusing to shrink to keep a room comfortable. That night, I opened the Project Lantern archive one last time. Not to relive it, but to close it properly. I backed it up, sealed it, and I let it go. Then I turned off my laptop, looked at Connor, and felt something simple and rare. Peace that did not require pretending. In the final stretch, the story stopped being about numbers and started being about what I would carry forward. I met with Malcolm Price once more, not as a daughter in crisis, but as a professional who understands systems. He asked what controls I would add if I could redesign the company from scratch. I told him the same thing I tell every client. Do not trust charisma. Trust process. Separate approvals, require documentation, rotate oversight, and never let one person become untouchable. Malcolm wrote everything down, and he said that was the lesson he should have learned earlier. He also said something I did not expect. He apologized for trusting Gordon Sinclair for so long, and for assuming family loyalty would keep Gordon honest. I told him loyalty does not prevent theft, it only delays exposure. Connor Reed and I also made practical changes. We updated our estate documents, set boundaries in writing, and made sure no one could use family ties to access our finances. Harper Lane joked that I turned trauma into policy, and she was not wrong. Elaine Sinclair stayed steady in her therapy work, and she stopped calling me to manage her feelings. Instead, she learned how to feel them without demanding my comfort. That shift mattered more than any apology. The community moved on, because communities always move on, but I did not move on by forgetting. I moved on by integrating. I learned that humiliation is a tool people use when they fear losing control. Gordon toasted me because he wanted to reduce me to a joke, and jokes are easier to dismiss than boundaries. The problem was, I was not a joke. I was a forensic accountant with a file, a process, and 3 months of preparation. The engagement party was not the beginning of my strength. It was the moment my strength became visible. A year later, Connor Reed and I hosted a small anniversary dinner at our home. Harper Lane came with a dessert and a grin. Malcolm Price sent a short note congratulating us, and he included a line about the company's strongest quarter in years, because transparency builds trust slowly, but it builds it. Elaine Sinclair did not attend, and that was fine. She sent a card instead, simple and respectful, with no pressure, no guilt, no hidden requests. That card felt like proof of her progress. Gordon Sinclair did not appear in our world at all, because the legal and social boundaries held. I realized something that night, while I watched Connor pour drinks. My life no longer had to react to Gordon. It could simply exist. We ate, we laughed, and nobody raised a glass to cut someone down. At the end of the night, Harper lifted her fork and said to a woman who stopped shrinking. I smiled, because she was right. The best revenge was not the audit. The best revenge was building a home where cruelty has no microphone. When I went to bed, I did not replay the toast. I replayed the quiet after. The moment the room realized truth had entered, I fell asleep grateful for a simple fact. I did not protect the man who hurt me. I protected the truth, and I protected the life I deserved.